Değerli katılımcılar, hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Bugün
Esteemed guests, welcome all. We are together with you on the second day of the Marmara Urban Forum. We are now conducting the session Syrians Barometer, and we have had similar event here with most of the academicians of this session already present. And so I would like to also mention about the academician Kemal Karpat, who has also been working on this project with us and talking about migration as a reality of life which transcends only humans but involves all creatures of life. We scan the whole ecosystem, and at the moment now we have here a team of Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, Murat Erdoğan, Elif Selen, and Ayhan Kaya, together with myself, Merve Aca. This is sort of like a discussion session. We are going to start with the presentation of Murat Erdoğan for the Syrian Barometer. This is a research for very valuable data that is repeated each year with real-life data from the field. And afterwards, in this session, we will look at the local perspective, international perspective, and also the data from the field brought into discussion by the stakeholders, by the panelists. Let's start with the presentation of Murat Erdoğan. We're comparing and contrasting data from the past with the new, maybe yet unpublished data of the latest research. Please, sir, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Merve. And I would like to also congratulate the Marmara Municipalities Union also. 3 years ago, there was a wonderful event organized in Istanbul in person. And now we have even a broader concept in the online platform. And I am very, very excited to follow up all these sessions throughout the days. So, about the Syrians Barometer research, I will make a summary within the 15 minutes allotted to me. There is a lot of detail, but the most striking points I will try to bring to you. First of all, I would like to point out that the study on Syrian barometers is the continuation of a series I started in 2013, actually. And ever since 2013, I have noticed that this process was actually a little more permanent than it was said to be. I wanted to point out that the study with both the Syrians and the Turkish citizens, we have simultaneous data collection and surveys where we can compare and contrast with the extensive data that we have by the contributions of also by academicians like Mr. Kemal and Mr. Ayhan, and we know that I would like to thank them also here. This is a study. I will not go into the technical detail, but it is a UN-supported research. I would like to say we have had the reports of this data until 2019, both in Turkish and English and Arabic. And the latest data I am about to publish, but in this meeting, maybe for the first time, I would like to share with you the latest data from our ongoing research and study. We know about the figures more or less, but I will just remind you at the moment, Syrians in Turkey under a temporary protection is also our target groups. We are not involving those who have permanent residences in Turkey. We are just it has now become more than 3.7 million under temporary protection, and we have about 98,000 who have permanent permits here, residents. And we can see here the graphics Right now, the passages over the border have really reached a minimum. And the problem here is that the increase of the population of the Syrians in Turkey are now triggered through births, newborns in Turkey. So in this slide, you can see an overall data about the Syrians in Turkey in the last decade. About 650,000 Syrian babies were born. About 770,000 are now attending schools, state schools, and about 450 to 500,000 are not able to attend school. And so the number of Syrians who are employed officially are about 60,000 from 2019. And so the employment opportunities are only dependent on the employers individually. So it's fortunately that it's not an extensive permit. So we have had some Syrians who have received citizenship in that sense. This is about 110,000 as per the data from the presidency. But lately we have heard that it is about 150,000. This is an issue where there is a problem of transparency, and which is a cause of anxiety for the overall public. At the moment, the refugees in Turkey, almost all of them are living together with the Turkish public in the urban areas as urban refugees. This is very important to understand the lifestyles of these refugees. And that I have to also point out that we have around 500 doctorate students and 1,500 master students. So overall, around 40,000 university students that are Syrian refugees. We believe this is important for the future of Turkey. I'm not going to touch upon details, but you see we have 1,067,000 Syrians under the age of 9 in Turkey. The number of babies born in Turkey, Syrian babies born in Turkey, around 100,000 per year, about 270 per day. This is actually a natural part of the process. This also indicates how the Syrians consider their future in Turkey. As you know, AFAD, the Disaster Relief Foundation of Turkey, has a process management about the Syrians in Turkey. At the moment, many of the refugees have been moved or relocated from camps to urban areas, metropolitan cities, and the Migration Management Directorate, as well as the UN, are monitoring and cooperating on this relocation process. I would like to talk a little bit about what kind of a relocation system there is. Actually, I have to say there is no system to it. First, initially, the Syrians coming to Turkey were kept in camp areas in the border regions. So about 250,000 were in number. And then when it was seen that these camps were insufficient, it was allowed for the Syrians to move into the urban centers. So the Syrians were actually relocated overall throughout Turkey. And at the moment, they're concentrated on the western cities in Turkey, but they're also dispersed throughout Turkey, and also eastern cities like Diyarbakir and other areas as well. And IOM and the Refugee Management System Directorate has also been working on determining the number of Syrians who are actually residing in cities apart from those that they have been relocated into. The main reason for this is to find jobs to earn their living, and practically would like to say that the Syrians have, with their own decisions, settled in Turkey, so to say, and the newcomers also settled with their friends and relatives who had come before them. So they are who could care for them in that sense. So this created communities within certain regions. I am going to now continue with the data of the Syrian Barometer. We see the data of 2019 already published. For 2020, we see that they have not been published yet. So it's sort of like a demo. In 2020, my view about the Turkish community is that, as stated before, there is a fragile social acceptance. As we see in Ankara, each and every passing day, the Syrians are at the heart of the politics of Ankara, and everyone has taken notice of this. As we have seen in Europe, this anti-refugee trend, which start in extremist groups, are now moving towards the center, and it has now turned into the heart of politics. We hope that this just remains with politics and does not go down into the streets, because otherwise it will be cause of great civil unrest for the society, in that sense that it will it can increase.
And to understand the Turkish society's opinions about Syrians, it's one of the most important things is how they describe the Syrian people. You can already see it on the graphics in 2018 and also 19 and 2020. You cannot read all of them, but in a few sentences I would like to summarize that. The perception of people running away, fleeing away from war, it is actually a risk which will have very dangerous outcomes in the future, and day by day we see the risk increasing, and we should not forget that. While as soon as we complete the 2020 side of the barometer, we will, in the following months we will have the 2021 work, and I really expect us to be facing more and more opposition from the opposing parties, let's say. And from the AK Party side and also the E Party side, 51 on the AK Party side, 51.6% of them are actually favorable towards Syrians, and E Party is 20.2% favorable towards them, and also HDP is in a very favorable position in this as well. So this is something very commonly discussed in Europe as well. In fact, a council or a board came to Turkey from Europe, and they really easily said, the head of them said, you can live with Syrians like neighbors or family members. So why send them to us? Yes, in a way that might be true. That may be true. We lived them for centuries. We are members of the same religion mostly, and we can get along to some extent. But I actually asked this question as well. When you ask the Turkish society in 2013 and 2014, I asked this as well. They are putting some distance between themselves and the Syrians. Most of them don't think that the Syrian people are not like Turkish people at all, and some of them actually think that they are similar, but there's still some very prevalent foreignization towards Syrian people, and you see it among AK Party members as well. And most of all E Party members are saying they know they're not similar with 88%, but AK Party members also are saying for 66.1% they are not similar. And with the different policies being discussed in this area, we can see some borders being well defined. And in Şanlıurfa, I saw it becoming very prevalent in a research we held there. which is very important historically and regionally. And when we asked about science, enterprise or business science in Arabic, they said 58% of them said yes. I think it would not be a problem. So, in politics, yes, the ruling party, of course, benefited from it for a period of time. We showed that we were a strong country worldwide, but right now, the supporting side for this is only amounts up to 5.9%, and even among the AK Party demographic, the majority of them do not agree with it anymore. This perception of yes, we are a strong people because we were able to took in Syrian people, and the most serious the most serious issue for people that they care about is the citizenship issue, and we are using some measurements and metrics for social measurement and also social distances, and we see some very high metrics. While the Syrian people are trying to get closer to Turkish people, the Turkish people are putting some distance between them. And very interestingly, in Şanlıurfa, this metric is even higher. So we can see that this discourse of being familiar or being similar, it doesn't adapt all that much. And so in social societies, we can see some issues being relevant as obstacles, and you can also see it in very high amounts in the AK Party demographic as well. And in terms of the in light of the question, how do you find the Syrian policies of the ruling party or the government? A lot of them don't believe that they are really beneficial. And when you ask the question, how were they able to, how much they were able to adapt to the Turkish society, a lot of them still do not believe them. And we see a support in harmonization policies. We see more people supporting it, and this is very important. And how do Syrian people get their livelihoods? When you ask this question, there's a very important answer. More than 80% say that they are able to get their livelihood thanks to the aids from the government, and a majority of the other the remaining parts say that they are basically begging for money. And also, we see some opposition against those who were able to get employment in Turkey. This is very important as well. And when we get to Syrians and their employees, we see in 2021, in 2020, 29.4% of them are being employed. And this is actually a very serious figure in population, because when you look at the age averages, we cannot look down below the age of 15, but unfortunately there are a lot who are working that are under the age of 15, and they are working in Turkish economy. These figures do not reflect the reality, but these are the realities of Turkey, and they are working as underage employees actually in this system, but no one is doing anything, I think, about this. And the political rights of Syrians people are really opposing in giving them political rights. I'm trying to emphasize the opposition of AK Party here, because as you know, they were the most favorable in the starting points, but even among the AK Party members, there are oppositions against giving Syrians any political rights in Turkey. And when you ask the second question, that is where the real problem shows its face. So when we ask what should we do about where we should relocate Syrian people to if they are to stay here, they say, no, I think we should either isolate them or we should send them back. And when you look at the Turkish society, the isolation answer comes forward as a choice. And when you ask about the Syrian problem, how would it rank among the problems faced the nationwide? They say it ranks among, an average, third to fourth place. And when we ask the question, would the policies about and the discourses about the Syrians in the election period, would they change your reflection, political views? They say yes, they do.
So, if the Syrians say, can we live together in peace? So we see that in 2020, 2019, 2017, we have the answer no in very high percentages. So, back to the Syrians, we ask the Syrians also some questions about their tendencies to return to Syria or not. So, most striking one is what they think about returning to Syria. In 2017, 16.7 said they were not thinking of returning to Syria. And now in 2020, 77% is saying that they are not thinking about returning to Syria. So those who say that they might return to Syria if the government changes reduced from 59% in 2017 to 16% in 2020. So in that sense, though, there is no motivation among the Syrians for a voluntary return to their country in that sense. So if you are going to remain in Turkey, what do you want? More than 80% say they want to live in Turkey as citizens of both countries, or maybe as dual citizenships or as Syrian citizenships. And we have 1.4 million Syrians who are receiving aid, and we know that a very high percentage is actually employed. This has been reduced due to the effect of the pandemic. The percentage of women working are quite low, so this is something we have to work upon. And the most problematic areas for the Syrians are the employment conditions and procurement of food and health, and I think maybe the most the least of their problems is segregation from the Turkish public. They do not state that they are experiencing a discrimination from the Turkish society. So what about harmony? So harmony with whom? With what? So for us, a life in peace is what we call a harmony. This is actually a complex process involving the government as well as the societal life as well. And the fact, the major part of their being accepted in society was that they were coming as the whole family, that they were running away from a war, and that they could stand on their feet and provide their own livelihood, and that they were not a burden, and they were not criminal either. So in that sense, two important things need to be emphasized here. So we need to have for the future a development-based harmony model. So a local harmonization processes need to come into place. And also, since there is no central allocation system for the incoming refugees in Turkey, we see that each city needs to develop its own harmonization model. So this could go to a certain healthy condition as well, because naturally the government will determine a centralized harmonization policy, but each city has to work on its own on this as well. So this is not something to be underemphasized. We need to be aware of the fact that as time goes by, the desire of the society for an integration diminishes. So we need to understand this, and we need to refrain from disregarding the concerns of the society in this regard, which will lead to higher unrest. So at this point, I would like to leave the word back to you, Merve, and maybe later on I will join the discussion. Thank you very much. We talked about harmony, and we know that the longer they remain here, the desire to return also diminishes, and believe the same similarities were drawn with the Turkish people in Germany, but of course there are different reasons for their migration to Germany. But even in spite of these different reasons and backgrounds, the longer they stay, the more integrated they are into they intermarry, they have kids, and they don't want to leave it. So we turn into a society where we coexist, and we have to solve everything together. And I had also worked with Professors Kemal and Ayhan on this, and I would like to ask Ayhan Kaya also on this initial policies for peace based on the relocation of the refugees, on humanitarian aid. And then we started talking about a social harmonization process, and social rights process together with our municipalities. So what changed in this sense? Why did more problems arise, and COVID and relief and disaster relief activities started? And so I think we have to also talk about my picks as well in this regard as well. Thank you, Merve. Within 10 minutes, I will do my best to try to answer these topics, to respond to these topics. Now, based on what Murat talked about, I would like to emphasize a few factors. One of these is the local governments that I want to inspect. And very briefly, I would like to make small additions to the data that Murat provided. Very recently, we've all been witnessing the statements on harmony have caused social events where people went as far as trying to lynch the parties. So unfortunately, the social unrest as a result of this is we noticed is due to the fact that this migration process, this refugee process, is being politicized. And so refugees and vulnerable groups, wherever they are in the world, are always launched to the public as scapegoats. And unfortunately, Turkey is not free of such issues either. But having said this, we also should not disregard the fact that the debates on refugees in Turkey has also been impacted by the fact that a certain group within the country has moved away from the status of needs to a status of opportunism. So in that sense, a certain group has started to state that we cannot send these people back because, they are fellow members of the same religion. And other groups are more racist oriented, and in that sense, are increasingly hostile towards foreigners. So I believe we need to focus or refocus always the debate on hospitality, on needs and people in need who are running away from war, who have been granted rights by international law, but they cannot make use of these rights and feel safe in this country. So therefore, they cannot do their part and contribute from their side to the harmonization process. So when we look at it from the Syrians' perspective, as Murat pointed out, many of them are still talking about cultural similarities, fellow religion members, being fellow religion members. So it's more historical perspective. So rather than groups that believe they cannot be resource sufficiency from material sources and from this economical sources, try to get their aims from these religious and historical perspectives, and trying to compensate from this disharmony, because we see that most of this refugee groups are groups that below the standard of poverty in that sense. And so we have in that sense, many international activities and moves towards improving the conditions of refugees, be it from the UN SDGs to international funds. And unfortunately, we know that the local governments do not get a good share from the central budget in spite of the increasing numbers of refugees in their regions. However, the municipality laws, the Article 13 of the municipality law is unique to Turkey, and this principle of kinship, which is stated in this article, is an article that has been adopted by many municipalities very successfully in the last decade, we see. And also many of the metropolitan municipalities and district municipalities with whom we have cooperated, we have focused on micro activities where we could develop a practicality of the harmonization process, because we know that from the good practices and best practices throughout the world, this process is best brought into effect on a level of neighborhoods. And we know that these micro implementations, these micro practices are very effective and very successful. From the projects of Zeytinburnu to projects of Şişli municipalities, and also in the municipality of Reyhanlı, we see that they are a child-friendly city project. So we see very great success stories as well in different and various municipalities. In that sense, we do have some developments and maybe recommendations for municipalities to be proactive in these efforts for harmonization in terms of micro practices. And the third thing I wanted to focus on is a study we have carried out together with Marmara Municipalities Union. It has been also a role model as well, because all over the world we see that there is a trend for city-centered or urban-centered development. We have the tendency to disregard the rural development, the agricultural focus, but we should not be doing that one. So we believe that the Marmara Municipalities Union can play a pioneer role in this, in prevention of this disregard, especially in agricultural areas, rural areas, which are left inactive at the moment, where the younger population is diminishing. The refugees can be relocated to these areas as not seasonal workers, but more in that sense permanent workers and residents of the areas.
And lastly, in terms of my specs, it was very important what you emphasized, because in 2015, the Brussels-centered and the 54 countries right now today, it's a organization that encapsulates all of these, and we are the actually we were the pioneers in 2015, and with the data we had provided back in 2015, but starting from that time, in the last 5 years, access to education, access to citizenship, access to health care, these are very important components. We had accelerated so much that we had left behind some EU member countries even. But there was a very important component, which was the employment market, and we were behind. We see a lot of disadvantaged refugees still in this area. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ayhan Bey. And employment opportunities and employment processes are one of the most important periods of and stages of harmonization processes. And I think local governments must be held responsible to some extent there as well. And under the auspices of municipalities, some vocational and professional trainings are given, and also CV creating workshops are held. And sometimes, with the collaboration of civil society organizations, we are seeing different kinds of projects for inclusion. So, in this area, in this point, I would like to ask a question to Kemal Hoca. So, social inclusion, we see a lot of it being mentioned a lot. And how can we share responsibilities in this area, in this multi-stakeholder and multidisciplinary area? How can we work together? How can we move forward? Think together and also work and move together, co-think and co-act within the slogan of MARUF. So what can we do under this slogan? And maybe you can actually tell us about some of the global examples, worldwide examples. Thank you so much. This is, I think, right now a great panel, but we have a limited time, so I would like to summarize the worldwide examples in under three different titles, and then Merve will try to answer your questions. My first point is the narrow definition around the world, and the refugee numbers, they are in correlation, they are rising ever. In 2010, there were 10 million refugees defined this way, but in 2020, it rose up to 21 million. And these figures are going to keep increasing. In one of the most controversial topics right now, the Afghans topic in Turkey. But the Haitians in Europe are being discussed in Europe, and are all of them going to be defined and described as refugees? It is still controversial, but those people are on the borders of EU countries. They were trying to go to the EU or maybe other places, all the way from Brasilia or Chile. So I will not even go into the Afghans topic, but maybe if you would like to, we could go into that. And the second part is the unresolvable parts. So the international actually examples since the Geneva Conventions and the signing of it since the 1950s. It indicates and holds that refugees, if they wish to do so, they should be able to go back to their countries, or if they wish to do so, they should be able to gain citizenship over time. And also the third topic is their residence in cities. And during the period of time since then, in 2000, 10 million refugees were able to go back to their countries, but in 2010s, only 4 million refugees managed to do so. So this within itself is a very striking figure. And relocation to third countries is getting narrower and narrower by day. We have limited time, like I said, so I will not go into this. This is a hot topic in the US, but during the Trump administration, conventionally speaking, 70 to 80,000 refugees were taken into the U.S. before the Trump administration, but during the Trump administration, the figures went all the way down to 15 to 10,000. So this is being reorganized, and even there is even a program being put in place for Afghan people. But integration is also a very big issue. And Murat Hoca also talked about this in terms of Turkey, but small numbers and groups of refugees in the countries they go to, only a small percentage of them can really adapt as citizens. And the load allocation and load distribution Merve talked about. when we look at the unresolvableness, we can see it narrowing down as well. But I would like to highlight the fact that, by the way, this may not sound all that satisfactory due to the current discussions in Turkey, but if you look at the global picture, global stage, Turkey, at least in terms of the financial cost and the sharing of the financial cost, is kind of lucky because with its collaboration in 2016 with the deal made with the EU, Turkey, when compared to other countries, other similar countries, Turkey got some very serious aids and reliefs. So what is the solution here? This year, this will be the 70th anniversary of the 1951 deal, but the general consensus is that this agreement is outliving its usefulness and that it cannot live up to the problems arising from the refugees right now. And so the source here, the starting point for these talks was the 2015 and 2016 crisis and the acceptance of the global refugees deal and agreement. And there are different proposals under this agreement. And for a long period of time now, within these proposals, with both Murat Hoca and Ayhan Hoca and Merve, as they have mentioned, as they have brought up, or at least they have tried to brought up, the issue of employment is still very prevalent and still very important. The integration, on integration terms, employment is one of the most important processes. This is a consensus among experts, but just like Murat Hoca has highlighted, this employment moves from formal economy to informal economy, and Ayhan Hoca talked about an index in this term. In the long way processed by Turkey in terms of harmonization, but the area that we are still left behind so much is for integrating refugees into the formal economy, and with the global refugee agreement, there are some policy proposals and suggestions that can lead to better futures, better days, and within their scope, Turkey and similar countries can collaborate and actually bring out their challenges to the international stage, to the global stage, and be heard there. So I am trying to limit my speech so that we can give some time to Selen Hanım, and if there are any questions, I would like to speak up. Thank you so much.
Well, the technical team has intimidated us a little bit about going over time. Talking about the most recent debates, maybe we could go into the incoming flux of the Afghans or the Syrians being in this societal frame for a long time. So Selen, maybe due to the fact that she has been active as an attorney, might have her own point of view to this entire situation. Leave the floor to her. Thank you very much. I would like to, first of all, thank the Marmara Municipalities Forum for this event, as well as all the academicians who have participated in the panel. I would like to say that, of course, Syrian Barometers is a resource which is a great source of data for us, as guiding us as to the situation in our hands, as well as our forecasts, as what needs to be done in long term. And we know that there are various research and surveys on social cohesion as well, and social harmonization as well. So as the team in the field, active in the field, we have been carrying out certain activities, but during our activities, we are try to form our projects, also taking the vertical and horizontal impact of the social cohesion into consideration as well. And we are in continuous contact with the local governments, and we aim to increase social communication as well. Social cohesion cannot be imposed from above. We need to also have the refugees and the local governments also as stakeholders in this process. And we have to take into consideration that there can be different dynamics for different regions and different groups. And we need to also be considering the local public of the regions also as a stakeholder apart from the refugees themselves. Of course, political solutions are valuable, but on the short, medium, and long term, we should not disregard the outcomes of the scientists in this. We are not just only good-hearted people or with keen on hospitality. We need to we have to be careful to not to witness any breach of human rights in the future. That's why we have to also support such research and such studies and such activities as well. And in this framework, we have increased our work with the municipalities recently, and the project with the Marmara Municipalities Union has been an important project for us. We have established social desks in the offices, mayoral offices, as well as the governor's offices. And we have also taken important steps in terms of providing education and training as well. So for social cohesion, we have also organized meetings that brought municipalities together with other bodies. And we also know that our partners in NGOs and civil society need to be active as well, that we need to establish a system where the refugees or the actors can have their voices heard directly in contact with the authorities themselves. Okay, I have to point out at this point that there are ongoing activities, but how effective are they in terms of diminishing tension and increasing social cohesion? So we believe that it is important to ask these questions while we carry out these activities, because we need to see the outcomes and the effects and impact of all these studies. We know that there are some positive steps being taken, but we have to ask ourselves all this as well, because the measurement of social cohesion is, of course, a topic unto itself, but it is among our priorities in terms of planning our activities within this framework. Another important topic for us is the issue of sustainability. Of course, we know that it is a longer marathon to be able to ensure social cohesion. We have our priorities with the local governments, but we have to also work on short-term goals such as problem solving and conflict resolution. This is very important for a sustainable impact for that. And such studies should not be aimed only at the refugees, but also at the local Turkish population as well. And we know that the local government needs a corporate approach to social cohesion, and we have sometimes different bodies and different offices as our partners. And we know that we have some very positive outcomes, but these are few in number still, and we will need more good examples on that. And also, I have to point out that conflict resolution trainings and refugees participating in the town councils, as in the examples of Bursa Yıldırım Municipality and Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality, are among the projects that we consider as success stories, where we have the different members of the societies, different communities coming together to form results. And we also have workshops where we have gamification with different partners from different groups. And we also have to have a broader concept and more inclusion of refugees in these methodologies, and access to basic needs and occupational trainings. And there are some vacant or empty or vacant business occupational areas where the Turkish residents actually are not keen to work on, and maybe trend towards those. Or besides that, also we need to act as a catalyst for coexisting with these people as well. I want to give an example with the project with the governorship of Istanbul. We have a project which is verified and certified by the Ministry of National Education. We have developed a curriculum together with the teachers to facilitate communication with the refugee children in the classes who have lived through the trauma of war in their homes and who have been victimized by war. So in that sense, we believe this is important. Another important dimension here is locality and social participation. I believe that social distance has a direct impact on social cohesion. But when we talk about some of the cases are specific to some regions. So a research carried out in Canada, Vancouver, or Konya cannot be that much impactful in another region in Ankara, for example. So we have to work specifically for the conditions of different regions with multi-stakeholders, and therefore have a more effective approach to that region or that problem in particular. And we have established a coordination, a network of municipalities in Turkey in this sense, where we can have municipalities in acting in coordination with other players and stakeholders within this network to choose their priorities, because social cohesion is one of the priority areas by many municipalities. Social cohesion is an issue which is touching upon very significant areas of life for many people. So we are quite keen on how creative we can be in our activities in the field in this context, and we need academia guiding the way for us, and with their suggestions, with their recommendations for us as well. Of course, we have to be creative to touch upon the lives of all these people. We have some misconceptions in the refugees as well as the local public, and we are actually very lucky in the sense that we have foundations like İKSV, Istanbul Art and Culture Foundation, who are supporting, or which are supporting arts, and we have a common collective pool of knowledge and know-how and intelligence of all of these foundations and these individuals as well. And this is a very big bonus for us, because we know that all the activities cannot fit into different regions and different conditions. So we believe that adaptation is the key here through this collective mind. So I would like to say, I would like to thank everyone for their participation in this sense.
Thank you so much. You have really made a very extensive evaluation. So you talked about sustainability, and maybe we can talk about sustainable development goals. So maybe we should emphasize again that as Marmara Municipalities Union, we are trying to make local processes more sustainable, and we are actually supporting our municipalities to this end. And municipalities, especially for the 11th goal, are working directly for equalities and also preventing inequalities, and migration is directly to do with this, and to be able to actually to be more sustainable in these social endeavors, we are supporting municipalities. And one of the questions is for Kemal Hoca. They want to be more informed about the AIDS. We see a lot of mention of AIDS and EU funds. They are very common. I guess they are come up on the news all the time. And there is mention of only half of them being truly allocated. So, what can we say about these economical aids, and as Turkey, and who really benefit from these aids, and why do they not allocate all of these aids? I think the person to go for this answer is among us, Selen Hanım. Selen Hanım has mentioned about the programs. If I'm mistaken, please correct me, Selen Hanım. 90 to 95% of them are actually funded by international funds, these activities, and 70% of them almost are being funded by EU. As I have mentioned in my presentation, within the scope and framework of the deal and agreement. And these funds see contribution from USA and Canada, and apart from those, countries like Japan, they have very serious contributions as well. I would like to highlight that countries like Russia and China do not contribute in any way or form to these funds. And to those friends who asked me this question, I can suggest them to Google financial tracking services. You can see all the funds being provided worldwide and where they are allocated and how much fund each country is receiving based on true data, not speculations, but data, and they can check it out for themselves. And right away, Merve Hanım, you also brought up the question, how much of these funds truly reach Turkey, and why are they so slow? This financial tracking service, a very important aspect of them is transparency and also accountability. We should not ever forget that these funds, those who are granting these funds for these projects and activities, they must be accountable. They are being held accountable for the taxes given to them by their citizens. So sometimes they may have some problems in terms of timing the allocation of these funds. And I would not like to actually give you a wide picture, but I guess UNDP Development Agency, the UNDP, every year brings out a monitoring report, and they are tracking and also explaining where these funds go and what kind of challenges and restrictions or inefficiencies that they face. And I would like to bring out one last point. Murat Hoca talked about some very important data regarding Turkey and how it was hard to reach that data. And as such, we as researchers and all the academicians and other people who are trying to reach data and figures, as soon as we become more transparent about them, maybe we will see new opportunities to create solutions. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kemal Bey. We have another question which I may address to all of you. Within the framework of social cohesion, especially the Syrian children and their harmonization, what can be some projects that can make things easier? Because we are talking about solutions all the time, but the definition of solution is not that clearly defined. There are some different talks. Some people say maybe we should get communities involving Turkish citizens and also Syrian people. So maybe you can talk about these issues. Murat Hocam, are you looking at the clock, at the timer? Yes, the timer increased up all of a sudden. So I don't know what happened. I actually bargained with the technical team and I extended our time for 15 minutes. And I would like to actually say one more thing about the previous question. The deal we are having, the conversation we are having with EU right now, we have a report about this, and they are saying that we are allocating different funds for countries worldwide, and they are always saying that we are allocating the most for Turkey, and we are doing things 5 times faster when Turkey is in the picture. Because we all know that Turkey should be an exception, should be seen as an exception. The cohesion and harmonization processes should be accelerated in Turkey. So, of the 6 billion that should have been allocated to Turkey, only 5 billion could be allocated, but the others are reaching to Turkey in different forms and ways. And despite this issue, there is not all that big of a problem. But whenever this topic comes up, I always have to say this. I feel, among the European and American people, there is this jargon. They always say thanks American taxpayers, or thanks European taxpayers. They have this jargon. But in the Western jargon, for some reason, when they are evaluating Turkey, I never heard them say, thank you, Turkish taxpayers. It's like, do we pay our money on other things? It's like, do the Turkish people not aid the government in these aids? And this is very saddening, I think, at least for me, because this population, this society, this people is the be-all end-all of these processes, and at the end of the day, all of the efforts of the Turkish people will have to continue for these to come to fruition. And I hope that in the future I will be hearing, thank you, Turkish taxpayer. So in terms of cohesion and harmonization, I've been trying to learn this for years. What is harmonization? What is cohesion? Let's forget about the Syrians for a second and ask with the Laz people and also Kurdish people and the Sunnis and Kemalists, etc. How cohesive are we within ourselves as Turkish people? As you know, with different demographics coming together and also with different migration ways, how can we live in harmony? This is a question regarding this topic. And as you have said before, Merve, you know that there is no standard clear-cut solution for this. There is no standard policy for this. In each country and even in different regions of each country, there are different applications and implementations, as Selena has just mentioned. And in Istanbul, you need to seek out a different policy in Esenyurt and a different one in Beşiktaş, for example. And the one in Beşiktaş should be different from that in Şanlıurfa, etc., or in Bursa. So the cohesion policy can only talk about principles. And so what are these principles and this equality principle? You must come up with mechanisms that will allow people to live in peace, live hand in hand in harmonization. But the tools in doing so can diversify to a great extent. But at the end of the day, if we are living together, we must try to live together with the least amount of conflict, and also by strengthening the people to the highest amount possible. And this is not only being mentioned in Turkey, this is mentioned worldwide. This being local, also national, being the citizen of a country. When you look at the harmonization processes being implemented worldwide, we see some processes that are almost assimilation efforts. I mean, when we get happier and happier when people, the outcomers are assimilated. And you know, there is always this issue very prevalent. And I will say one last thing. The harmonization processes, if we were to hold one in Turkey for Iranian people, it would be maybe very easy because 50,000 Iranian people could be very manageable, very possible to assimilate within the Turkish people. But the one thing that is much more important than the cultural structure is the number of refugees or the number of outcomers. And the number of refugees in Syria is very high, as you know, and as numbers go higher, the people's bad thoughts and also their negative thoughts are growing as well, and as a result, they cannot even have any harmonization with the local people or the local governance. You do not have to go all that far to see examples for this, I think. So in this area, we are facing a serious problem, a serious issue, and especially in some of the denser refugee populated areas, this is even a more prevalent issue, and this issue is becoming more and more politicized each day, and people are even promoting its politicization. I always say there is the government part, there is the policies part, but the real deciding factors, I think, are two things. One of them is the numbers, the figures, and the second part is the societal acceptance. If the societal acceptance is not up to a certain level, they may complain, and we can see actually them grumble and not accepting refugees. And I looked at how many of the voters AK Party lost in the recent years. It's about 7.5%. And in places like Hatay and Kilis, where Syrian people are mostly located, this rate goes down to 5.5%. So, looking at this normally, the normal assumption would be that for this figure to be higher, but the people there are not actually in disagreement with what the government has done, and for this perception of what the government, also the local governments are trying to do with Syrian people, it is becoming more and more different each day, and it is growing, and I think we should be doing something about that. Thank you.
I would also like to say a few words about this. This is something I learned about in a meeting I had today. According to the latest data of TÜİK, the amount of child workers in Turkey has been reduced. And, of course, the statistical data has to be seen with some background data. We know that the Syrian children are not included in these statistical data because we know that Syrian children are being employed very actively, especially in agricultural areas. And since the question focuses on children, I wanted to continue on children. Of course, education is the most important channel for the cohesion of children into society. At the moment, as it stands, about 65% is the rate of Syrian children attending school in Turkey. But we don't know at this point how much dropouts there are, how many of them could actually continue with the school. So it's not possible to determine. And moving on from the example that Selen gave, especially in the schools, we need to have a perspective of intercultural education. Is imperative, and the Office of Refugees has defined the education through intercultural communication. It's very correct, but in order to enact this, we first need to train the educators, train the trainers, so to say. The teachers need to adopt this view. So these children need to feel that their parental cultures are also accepted, and that they themselves are accepted as a culture, as a society, are valued in that sense. So this is the way to ensuring the integration and cohesion for these children. And we also know from other examples is that parents, Syrian or other refugee parents, can participate in social life more actively through their children who are attending school. And also organization of sports activities. This is where the ministries and municipalities need to be active, and also using the popular channel. We need to maybe work with the cultural performances of music and rap, hip hop, where competitions can be organized, and folklore and drama workshops could be activated. There are many, many more other micro level activities which could be useful for processes like social cohesion or integration. As I agree, we should be focusing and working on a micro level, on a neighborhood level, I believe, let alone the national level. We need to work on a local level, because the problem itself is local. So local municipalities have a lot to do in a sense. Yes. Thank you very much, Marve. I would like to say a few things about the questions as well. And for the first question, Kemal Kirsch also mentioned that there is what's called a 3 RPs. The resilience plan needs to be in action under the leadership of the state, and where all the ministries have taken place, all the international organizations are cooperating within this framework. And when they look at the website, you will see that it is also displayed very transparently what the budgets are and how they are spent. And there's a call going out every year to all stakeholders, indicating what kind of a budget or funds does Turkey need, and or other countries like Turkey who are impacted by the crises as well. So this is actually an international community that is making out this call to the impacted countries as to what they need. And you will notice here on the website not all of the issues and the calls are funded. And the fact that the budget is there does not indicate that we have effective projects in place. We need to have NGOs with sound financial basis and infrastructure to be able to receive these funds, because when the finance and funds are not managed probably, we see that these budgets cannot be spent correctly, and it can even be called back. So it's very important to have the people in the field to work with good project management. I know that we have limited time, but thank you for reminding me. Child labor is an issue that for us is one of the major challenges in the international arena, together with child marriages. And there are numerous projects that we are carrying out, and we have HR support and funding and vehicles. We provide to around 41 centers where we try to determine child labor, child workers, and we try to take them away from that labor and to bring them into the schools. So we are touching many refugees with these projects. And in that sense, yes, we do have best practices here and there, but to have a national or nationwide network or methodology, it's very important to be able to make the appropriate determinations together with the NGOs. During the pandemic, together we work with the Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality to help the refugees that were impacted by the pandemic, but we didn't have the data. Together with the charity organizations, UNHCR, and the Metropolitan Municipality of Istanbul, we could get sufficient data to be able to disseminate aid packages. Of course, this is not sufficient, but we have noticed that we need to focus on the local level. So rather than a central solution, we need to work on a local level, because we see that the activities that we do on the local level are strong enough to even impact these central policies as well. Thank you. We know that these solutions on the local level are important. We have to be both local and national and global in all of our activities. So we have to be multi-tiered in our approaches. We still have a long way to go.
And also with the COVID-19 pandemic, we talked about some extra work that was needed for the social cohesion. And we will be sharing and publishing a report when we talked about local projects. I would like to talk about this. We prepared this with Murat Hoca, and it is in the scale of the Marmara region of Turkey. And we'll be sharing it with you in about 1 month. And the first report was actually in 2017 with the example of Istanbul. And this time we actually extended the scope of this example, and with 3 layers conversations held with 95 different municipalities. We'll be sharing the results. We talked about policies and problems and solutions in this process. And dear panelists, if you have any contributions, please. Now, when you talk about cohesion and harmonization, and especially what Murat Hoca has said about taxation and his observations around them, one of the other aspects of harmonization is being able to be in line with the global cohesion. So today the topic of tax and taxation, and also the taxpayers' contributions in the education and the healthcare of Syrians, etc. If this is not perceived in that way, I think Turkey should actually question herself in this manner, because it should be able to make the Western world see this sacrifice, this kind of diplomatic discourse is very important. It is in fact crucial to get more support, more aid and funding for Turkey. That's what I thought. Can I have a small contribution? Of course, we have only 1 minute. So, about Syrian people in Turkey, things have been almost standardized until last year. And if Turkey cannot actually get in control of the migration about Syrians in any other future endeavors, we will be having serious damages to ourselves. That's all I would like to say. And I think we should also have another event. We would also like to host you in an event in Marmara Municipalities Union. I would like to thank everyone who listened to us, and also I would like to thank all the participants and panelists. And the roundtable, I guess, is still going on in the other room. You can connect there if you would like to. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Have a great